IVM.
Do you often dream about leading a more creative life? Whether you wanted to be a painter, a dancer, a cricketer, or a photographer. Maybe you wanted to play games for a living. Growing up, financial responsibilities often take us away from our true passions. Now imagine if you could explore that creativity while still making sure that your family is financially secure. Find a way for the artist and the realist within us to coexist. करो पूरे अपने इरादे, अपनों से किए सभी वादे. SBI Life अपने लिए, अपनों के लिए. To know more about our insurance plans with wealth creation, log on to www.sbilife.co.in. IRDAI registration number 111.
Hey guys, IVM podcast is turning 7. Can you believe it? It's been an awesome journey for me specifically. I was a guest on Karthik Nagarajan's podcast Filter Coffee to start off proceedings. Then, I started doing my own podcast, which was called The Traveling Professor's Diary, and then it's transformed into Smarter With Sid. I've done about more than 220 odd episodes along with IVM, and it's been such an awesome journey for me with these wonderful folks. I can't wait to see what the next 7 years brings for all of us. Here's your smart fact of the day. In 2017, Ocean Tomo released a study that turned heads. It showed that over the past 40 years, the vast majority of the value of the Standard & Poor 500 had transformed from tangible to intangible assets. According to the study, intangible assets had gone from representing about 17% of the value of the S&P 500 in 1975 to 84% of its value in 2015. Think about that. Upwards of 80% of the value of what is widely regarded as the best single gauge of large cap US equities transformed from tangible assets that could be, held, weighed, shipped to intangible assets. Intangible is assets that include intellectual property like patents, trademarks, copyrights. They also include brands. And that is what I want to talk about. The return on investment on an intangible asset like brand. So what and how can we measure branding work and what it is all about? Let's focus on this in this episode of Smarter With Sid. Let's go. This question is because of Sarthak Garg. So shout out to Sarthak. He asks, how do we calculate the return on investment for a branding campaign? And, if you invest 20 lakhs of a company's budget as the marketing budget, along with the cost of developing content and other resource costs like employees, how would we be calculating ROI on that investment? And can we correlate it to growth in sales, growth in brand value, etc., etc.? Sarthak, thank you so much for this question. And I want to be very specific and clear about my answer to this. First of all, let's not conflate the term marketing budget with the term brand budget. Because marketing budget also includes stuff which is around, sales oriented and promotional activities like performance marketing digitally and maybe even the old fashioned way. So what we need to figure out is, how much are we spending on brand building work? Now, brand building work itself might have different aspects to it. It could be a brand image building campaign, the likes that you see Coke and Pepsi do, or it could very well be, improving the brand experience of your product or service or whatever you're trying to market. And that is also something which can form part of your brand work, right? So the fact is that brand building work can take various forms, and it is extremely difficult to kind of correlate it with some hard numbers. What do I mean by hard numbers? I mean sales, revenue, I mean profitability, and the rest of it. And yet the Standard & Poor 500 says that a brand's intangibleness contributes to, the valuation of a company in the stock market. So what gives? What is this difference, and how can we actually measure whether a brand is doing good work or bad work? Now, sales and, revenue and the rest of it, you can kind of correlate with the start and the end of a brand campaign. So you can say, okay, we did this brand campaign right now, and how much have sales and revenues increased in, say, 6 months or a year or whatever. But what we must understand that these are correlations, but we can't prove direct causation. And in fact, the sales activity typically is measured quarter by quarter, while branding work typically takes a long time to actually gain any kind of momentum. Why is that so? Because branding is not only talking to your conscious mind, but it's also talking to your subconscious state of affairs. And that actually means that it will take its time towards building whatever it's trying to build in your head. Now, what is branding actually trying to build in your head? Branding is actually trying to do a couple of things in your mind. The first thing is that it is trying to build awareness. Unless and until you are aware of the brand, let's say you see an Amul hoarding, you understand what Amul is. Now, I'm not a great proponent of all the things that Amul does on its hoardings, but it is directly connected to the fact that awareness certainly increases because of branding work. The second thing is differentiation. So, if I look at one of the most important things that a brand campaign can do is that it can differentiate itself from competitive offerings as well as alternatives that a customer might choose if the brand did not exist in a very strong way in that person's mind. And thirdly, a brand campaign actually, or brand work of any kind, also builds trust. And that trust is extremely important for customers to remain being customers, or prospects to actually feel comfortable when you're dealing with, somebody, a representative from your company. So differentiation, trust, and awareness seem to be very much part of what a brand campaign does. And when I say brand campaign, do keep in mind once again that I'm not only talking of the image building activities, but it could also be towards enhancing the brand experience that I'm getting, maybe in a car showroom or maybe in a coffee shop or whatever your product or service may be. So, brand does work which is connected to emotions. Now, emotions and logic typically don't go hand in hand very well. So, it is very difficult for you to say, okay, I made people feel great things about my product or service, and how has it related in a sales thing? Sure, you can correlate it, but I think it is better for us to step aside from this entire debate and actually see what a brand does. Now let's imagine this, and it's a perfect metaphor for actually explaining what a brand campaign or brand work of any kind does. Imagine two patients with COVID. Okay, so they've both contracted COVID, but the first patient has, a lot of comorbidities, and is a little obese, and has not been really taking care of his or her lifestyle. And on the other hand, the second person, let's assume that both of them are of the same age, but the second person has taken care of his or her lifestyle, takes a lot of vitamins, and stays healthy, does a workout. It's quite likely that the prognosis for patient number 2 is much better than patient number 1, even though they have got the same disease. Now, this metaphor is very useful because it allows us to see, just imagine that you have a situation wherein patient number 1 is the patient in the branding piece who's not doing any branding work, and patient number 2, the company which is doing branding work. Now imagine when the rubber meets the road, and when the salesperson is going out to sell something, or a returning customer is going to the store and is contemplating various alternatives and choices. This is where brand building works, because awareness, differentiation, and trust suddenly get kicked into your mind, and then you make the choice for that brand which has connected very deeply on these emotions. It is like those vitamins that you need to take. That is why I always believe that any marketing practitioner, or maybe people on the finance side who are trying to find some core cause of how can this work be connected to it, are actually looking at brand building work as aspirin that you actually take to solve a disease, rather than the vitamins that you need to take in order to remain healthy. And that's why I think that this metaphor really works. We need to have different metrics towards brand building. And this brand building work, works across the various stages that a customer goes through, whether the customer is not even considering buying anything, which represents a latent need in the mind of the customer, to the customer actively considering variety of things, becoming aware of alternatives, or very close to actually selecting something, or actually selecting something and perhaps repurchasing something. I think the core aspects of awareness, differentiation, and trust are the metrics in which you can actually measure a brand campaign, because brand campaign is all about vitamins. And by the way, I don't like the term brand campaigns. That's the last thing that I would like to say before I close out this episode, because I believe that today the word should be brand conversations. What is the conversation that you want to have with your prospects, your customers, and everybody others, every other stakeholder connected to your brand, rather than what's the campaign that I need to give like overlord to my customer base. I think in this egalitarian, information symmetrical world, I think starting a conversation and measuring the impact of this continuing conversation is extremely important for any budding marketer to keep in mind. I hope you liked this episode of Smarter with Sid. And if you do like this episode, do click on the like button or subscribe to this particular podcast. And hey, if you like this podcast, IVM's got a lot of great podcasts that you should certainly check out. And if you like who I am, well, you can always connect with me on LinkedIn and on Instagram, where I am the Traveling Professor. On that happy note,
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On this round is on me. Gauri has a conversation on building a sustainable luxury travel ecosystem with entrepreneur Jaisal Singh. On the Wire Talks, Siddharth asks American philosopher Jason Stanley to decode his book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them. On The Longest Constitution, Priya explains the concept of invisible work and how Javed Akhtar and the copyright law are connected. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav tells us an interesting story that connects West Indies cricket, jackals, and Mariamman temples. And on All Things Policy, the Takshashila folk look into the Ukraine-Russia conflict and its associated geopolitics. So, on a personal note, I wanted to let you all know that this week marks the 7th anniversary since I started IVM. I'm eternally grateful to the team we have here, especially Kavita Rajwade and Tejas Sringarpure, who have been here since the beginning. They've seen the struggles, our eventual acquisition by Pratilipi, and our continued struggles to make podcasting a large and thriving part of the media industry. We have the best hosts in the world, and I have to say that I'm so glad and so grateful that they have chosen to work with us. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to you, the millions of folks who have heard or watched our content. All I can say is, you ain't seen nothing yet. I hope you join us as we continue this journey. In the meanwhile, do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platform you're listening to. You can also check us out on YouTube. To get a list of all of our channels, you can go to ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, where you can go to all the channels. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, Bank of Baroda, Max Life Insurance, India Water Portal, and HDFC Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.